Bismillah, walhamdulillah, wassalatu wassalamu ala rasulillah, amma ba'd. Today's video is regarding how I became Muslim. It's a video that I feel I've covered the content of this question in the channel previously. However, I'm getting lots of people on the TikTok and on YouTube now as well re-asking. And so we all know how the content creation game works anyway. It's pretty much a rinse and repeat situation. You know, if you're new to this channel, if you're not new to this channel, that predominantly we are here talking about Islam, of course, to become Muslim, to get married, to have babies, to make hijrah. Hijrah is to emigrate to the lands of Islam if you are not in those lands, to study the Arabic language and to memorize the Quran. Pretty basic stuff. In my bio on my YouTube, it reads as following: Bismillah walhamdulillah, in the name of God and all praise is due to God. Knowledge extinguishes fear. That which seems foreign or misunderstood appears strange and dangerous. Let us break bread, extend the olive branch, and have civil and open dialogue. This channel attempts to dig a little deeper than the surface level propagandist narrative of Islam and aims to reveal its true nature and essence, which is one of peace and beauty. So I guess where does one start? It's such a large and all-encompassing question. I think the first thing that comes to mind is I remember making a deal with God when I must have been 5 years old. And this is something I find common across stories of reverts or stories of people who were living a secular atheist, what I would consider in growing up a normal lifestyle, to those that ended up embracing a particular religious tradition, is they had a deep curiosity, they had an open heart, they had a mind that was in many ways relentless, seeking a truth seeker. And I certainly do remember my times in my adolescence, in my teenage years, in my early adulthood. Religion is a scam, organized religion is there to control the masses, so on and so forth. The story of when I was a child, I remember being maybe 4 or 5 and saying, if you are real, and I'm now talking directly to the Creator, and there's this sense of moreness in all children. This is in Islam, the concept in the Arabic language of the fitra, the innate constitution, the natural disposition of each human being to recognize the divine reality. And I remember saying, if you are real, then it seems pretty reasonable. Show yourself to me, prove yourself to me. Is that not the only reasonable way to believe? You know, this is not, Islam is different to Christianity in the sense that it's not simply faith alone. It's not blind faith. No, it is in fact a reasonable and rational discourse that one takes looking at how we should operate within this world, how we came here, where we are going. And you can come to the conclusion that we are in fact a creation. Every creation has a creator. But in relation to that initial story is, I remember making a deal. And as my life went on, 2 decades later, I remember thinking, I have been shown enough here. I have been shown enough. It now feels inauthentic for me to discard and reject the true origin of our existence, which is the Creator, subhanahu wa ta'ala. And something else comes to mind in relation to this story is the very famous new atheist messiah, astaghfirullah, of Richard Dawkins. I've read his book, like many people have, The God Delusion. And he actually says in the beginning of that book, the one and only, in his concept of the world, the one and only reasonable way to believe in the supernatural, the unseen, that which we cannot see, and the religious narratives, is some kind of personal and as a result invigorating and, invigorating and settling, if that's the right word. I had these experiences. So it's like, obviously I can't, we never know what somebody else is perceiving. We never know how somebody else is downloading their environment. So I can never share with you what my experiences have been, but it's, in science, it's the age-old thing of, is the color blue that I see the same color that you see? We both recognize it as blue. It starts to get very philosophical. So anyway, I made this deal with God when I was a young child, and I guess the answer came to fruition. Like, I remember also being at school, maybe in the same period of kind of beauty and innocence. You're like 5, 6, 7 years old. And I remember just thinking, surely this can't be it. This thin strip of physical light through which we experience everything, the mundaneness of the physical realms and our routines, waking up, eating breakfast, going to school, eating lunch, coming home, eating dinner, going to bed after watching an episode of something on the television. I was like, there's got to be more. I didn't know what that more was. But again, growing up, having a myriad, a plethora, a wide range of experiences that opened my eyes to the reality that there is more than meets the eye. There's just absolutely no doubt about that. And being hyper curious about the impact of our actions, what can we grasp onto to understand what is right and wrong, good and evil, the competition, so to speak, or the conversation academically between objective moral standards and subjectivity. That is to say that we kind of can all make up what we think is right or wrong in our own hearts. So I guess there's going to most likely be a multi-part series, but the first thing that comes to mind is personal conviction, which in Islam we see as a blessing from God himself, but God only gives you that which you work for, so to speak. So although it's a blessing that Allah gave me my conviction, my iman, my strong faith based on experience and reason, it's also something that I was searching for. So, I'd almost forgotten about that deal I made with God as a child. But then in my early 20s, when you're in that period of self-discovery, the idea of praying to God was so ridiculous, and people are so bound in thinking they know it all. It's effectively arrogance as well as ignorance, a combination of arrogance and ignorance that prevents people from even thinking about speaking to themselves. What a foolish notion to get on your hands and knees and speak to yourself. How degrading, how foolish, it's preposterous. I wouldn't even think about doing something like that. But it's only when you attempt to build a conversation that you receive a response, right? How else can you? So then I took what you could see as the largest step, only other than accepting the reality of a creator, of God, of the Almighty. After that, that is the biggest step, I think, and from that moment to embracing Islam was approximately 1 to 1.5 years. And in that time, I started to kind of soften up and have my hands to the sky and say, I'm going out on a whim here. I'm saying, God, if you're real, that's when I remembered, like when I asked when you were, now, like, I do believe in you, but I'm still hesitant to communicate with you because it feels very foreign. Bearing in mind, I grew up to this point, 24, 25 years, never communicating with God. Well, sorry, forgive me. I would have stopped when I was maybe 7, and I would have re-engaged when I was maybe 24. So you're talking about 16, 17 odd years of no communication with God. And as we know, when we look at the kind of the Islamic, the fundamental component to Islamic doctrine, La ilaha illallah, there is nothing worthy of worship except from Allah, the one true God. So what is it that we worship? And this is also, and I'll finish here because this can be multi-part series, is when we look at society, COVID 2020, that time for reflection, to see all of the political corruption, it gives one a lot of time to reflect and think, what forces are at play here? Why, in a world where there's enough to feed every human being, is there a disparity of wealth that is completely unreasonable? Yes, the man that contributes more should have more, no doubt about that. But should there still be, it just gets one thinking. And I guess the point I wanted to make there is that when we look at society, it got me thinking more and more about concepts of, bear in mind I studied philosophy at university, so I was always hyper conscious about this tension between good and evil. And so I was young, I was 7, and then that 16 years of seeing seeing myself as a god, or my desires as God, the opinions of others as God, money and status and notoriety, fame, respect, these all as gods, these are pulling you left and right, and you're adjusting your behavior based on all these factors that are outside of yourself, that are not actually there for your benefit. So my final point, and why I mentioned COVID and lost my train of thought slightly, is when you look at society and realize that everybody's worshipping something. It reminds me of the Bob Dylan song, it may be the devil or it may be the Lord, but you've got to serve somebody. And I think, people will make their cigarettes and alcohol their God. That's their worship. They wake up and the first thing they do is they have their coffee, they have their cigarette. The first thing they do is, we worship that which we do regularly. If you look at the word religion and its Latin root, it's to be, I believe, bound. To be bound or obliged. It really is our actions. Religion is just the way that we do things. And so the Muslim does things in a distinct manner, different to those that worship whatever they worship. Like I say, it's usually the desires, and I think that it's a very powerful skill and one that will benefit the individual in their life dramatically, if you can overcome your desires. That when you want to engage in A, B, C, and X, Y, and Z, that you actually know that this is just a fleeting emotion and you can take it or leave it. You don't have to be slave and victim to your desires. And that's part of the process of embracing God, is realizing that you can overcome your ego, you can overcome your desires, you can overcome negative impacts from the environment or desires, temptations, whatever it may be. And you can start to put yourself in the driving seat, but knowing that you're in the driving seat, but who gave you the car? Who is the one that created the roads? Who is the one that gave you the capacity to drive that vehicle in the first place? That's all from Allah. So not to get ahead of your station. It also humbles you. It also makes you incredibly meek and puts you in your place, remembering that you are nothing, but at the same time you have the capacity for greatness in many ways, and that comes from the most great, the most wise, the almighty, so on and so forth. So I feel like I've said my piece. It is a question that really I could probably do 10 or 20 or 30 14 15 minute videos on, but just to recap, we said a memory of when I must have been 5 or 6 years old, and I made a deal with God saying, if you are real, then show yourself to me. I then cut contact for about 16 years before re-engaging, after starting to re-engage with the very notion of a creator and a God, based on my experience that made me remember that deal I made and think, well, actually, I've been shown many things that would constitute the reality of God. And so it seems an injustice, it seems unreasonable for me to continue to turn my back to God. Then we moved on to the the kind of the unseen and the moreness of this world. And I remember going home from school just being like, is this it, this material world? I know that that absolutely is not the case, and we know that based on the fact that we are just perceiving this world on 5 limited senses, and there's obviously a lot more out there. And Islam talks about angels and jinn and the other creations of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And then finally, just the corruption in society and how, you know, this new postmodern world is moving so far away from traditional conservative values that really are the bedrock and the foundation of society. It made me think, well, I don't want to be part of that. So what is the alternative? What is the alternative to all this madness? Stability, religion. Now, at that point, which religion is going to allow me to best show my gratitude, best show my thanks, best have that framework to live out my life? And that's when I unfolded a pretty long and deep comparative religious study, and at the very end of that came to embrace Islam. So perhaps next video, inshallah, I'll be talking about that comparative religious study, and this will be a multi-part series. Always remember to big up your good selves, and until next time, good folk, see you in the next one. Inshallah, Al Wiedersehen.